Hello, everyone, and welcome to One Cold War Podcast, episode 351. My name is Benjamin Yoder, and I just woke up from a nap, so we'll see how my talking goes today. I haven't taken a nap in a long time. That was the first time I've done it, and I was like sitting, I was like, what am I going to talk about on the podcast? I laid down on the couch and then was gone, and here I am today. I don't know how long I was asleep for. My name is Benjamin Yoder. Dreaming about video games, and this week we got a little bit of a little all over the place kind of show. Again, no news this week. I did look at news, just nothing really jumped out at me. We'll get into one thing that I saw that I thought was kind of cute, but we'll get back to that later. But I played the Strinova beta test. If you don't know what that is, like Counter-Strike kind of game with anime girls, so we'll talk about that when that comes up here. I also have been doing a lot of thinking recently. I'll go. It's gonna be a journey. But I just want to kind of let you guys in on like where my brain is when it comes to being like, from time to time, a judgy little boy, about a lot of different things. And you know, it is a fault of mine that I'm trying to resolve. So, but there's a lot of places that it kind of impacts me. So I thought I'd bring it up and talk about it because it's been on my mind lately. And then also I'm going to give you guys some updates on the PSO video when we get to our little Ko-fi segment. And then finally, after 20 years, I received this game Christmas of 2004 alongside my Nintendo DS. There is a hit video game that did not get the attention and love it deserved by 14-year-old me. So we're going to talk about that game. Do you want to know what it is? I'll keep it a secret. Anyways, I might put it in the description of the podcast. So if you want to know, look at the description of the podcast. Hey, did you listen to the Snowy Area podcast that came out last week? Someone brought to my attention that it's probably Snowy Aria, not Snowy Area. But you know, I don't think I was corrected at any point in the process, so I will leave it to my own brain to live with that for the rest of my life. But it's okay. Snowy Aria podcast, where we talked about bad games, kusoge, you might call it, the Japanese term for bad games, kind of. Although, you know, I think there's some connotation with the word kusoge that's not so much just the literal meaning of what it's like, basically just shit game, right? So I talked to Snowy Area about her love of those games and stuff. Yeah, it was a good time. I think hopefully it's something that if you listen to it, you enjoyed it. And if you're not listening to it, maybe check it out. See what's going on in there. See what's going on in that podcast. 2 hours, I think, something like that. So anyways, so that was fun. I got another one of those podcasts coming up at the end of this next month coming up here. Although I think by the time you're hearing this, it's going to be July already. So at the end of July, keeping that process going, keeping that process moving. So, yeah, I hope you enjoy it. What's the thing they say at the end of Nintendo Direct presentation things where like they show a video, they'll be like, how did you like it? I was thinking about that recently because like every Nintendo Direct, they'll be like, how was that kind of thing? And I wonder if I'm pretty certain, I think somebody on Blue Sky responded to me letting me know that like, yeah, there is like a little verbal tick that there is at the end of like showing someone something in Japan. So I don't know if it's like a do desu ka kind of thing, where it's just like, hey, how was it kind of thing. And it's just the standard mechanism, kind of like the thanks for the food kind of thing that gets brought over here. And just, it sounds weird and awkward because it's like specific to that type of culture rather than, you know, actually something we normally do in English, but we have to fill that void with something because they did say something. So we got to put something in there. When I worked on the Love and Berry OVA fan translation fairly briefly, that was one of the hardest things I found was like where there are times where a character says something that when translated means nothing. And you're like, okay, well, why is this being said? Like the words coming out of their mouth means nothing, right? So there's a reason why this happened. But you know, like, what do you put in there? And, you know, sometimes I think you just gotta be flexible and let it go. That was kind of like one of the disagreements I kind of had with that whole project was, and like, this is years ago. This is not me like airing grief, but I think ultimately like that was probably the thing that got me to move away from it, was just like, there's a lot of things I was like, oh, we want to be accurate here. And it's like, well, the accurate meaning is nothing. So stuff like that. But you know, hey, people love accuracy in video game translations, so go check it out on Twitter. There's lots of people ready to tell you all about that. And guess what? I am not a translator, so I'm not there to tell you what is right or wrong. So yeah. Anyways, like I said, I didn't really see a lot of news this week that I was super into or super jumped out at me. But there was one game. Is that like I forget what it is, like Tokyo Dungeon or something like that, or Indie Game Tokyo or something like that. I forget the event, sorry. But the game itself is called Lillian Dream World, which is basically a game where you're a dog. I don't know what kind of dog it is, but you're a dog like on the ground with a sword in your mouth, going around fighting stuff. And there's like a very like Dynasty Warriors kind of Musou system to it, and the attacks are pretty ridiculous. Like, you're swinging your sword around in your mouth. You can stand up on your hind legs and punch people with your front legs, and like a bunch of just weird stuff. Like, you spin and fireworks come out of you and they blow up all around you and stuff. Like, it's just kind of a flashy action RPG kind of thing, and it has like this whole thing with looks like maybe like a dog training thing where you, it looks like you had like a owner and they would like play with you and stuff. So I think some of the segments of the game are taking place from like a first person perspective where you play with the dog who's the main character and stuff. And it seems like it's probably like a Love Tuna situation. Love Tuna. I know everyone here, if you've been on the one short train long enough, you know what a Love Tuna is. But a game where like basically the whole story is, you know, about either the dog or the owner dying, one of the two. Which one it is, who can say? But the trailers seem to imply it is one of the others. So I'm trying to remember. I think in Love Tuna it is the dog who is dead, and I think he's like going around town trying to comfort people who are crying. If you don't know, Love Tuna, Dojin game, it's a rhythm game, but it's all about like tears, collecting tears when you do the rhythm game stuff. And I think the whole thing is that you're a dog, a ghost dog going around comforting people, either as they died or you are dead as a spirit going around helping them. I think is the latter. So anyways, cute game. It's like 5 levels long, but it's got a lot of cutscenes. I went on a whole thing recently with somebody in the PCFX fan club talking about Dojin games and like making those available or not, you know, when they're not being sold. And it was a very long conversation that I super appreciate because I hadn't really been given a lot of pushback on like uploading Dojin games to archive.org yet. And that was like the first real pushback I've gotten. And I'm really thankful somebody gave me that pushback because like for so long, everyone was just like, just upload them, just upload them, just upload them. And that's where I went and talked to Frank Cifaldi about it. And I was just like, I don't know what to do. And Frank was like, I can't tell you what to do. They did put it out there in the world. So, you know, it's available and they should expect people, you know, should be able to get it or not should be able to get it, but, you know, can get it and do what they want with it. But he's like, but I'm not going to tell you what to do because Dojin games are our personal projects, right? So it's like me, like, you know, if you gave me your short story that you wrote and then I was like, yeah, we got to archive this for the world and upload it on the internet, you know, without your permission kind of thing. It's kind of a weird situation. So I don't know what my feelings are on that still, but I'm glad I had that conversation about it. So anyways, Lillian Dream World, it looks cute. It's on Steam right now, but it's not released. So you can go look at it, look at the trailer. I'll link the description, I'm sure. I did not put the link here, but hopefully I remember to do that. And if not, if you're like, I looked for the link, Ben, and could not find it, feel free to message me and Ben and be like, yo, where'd that Lillian Dream World at, man? It made me think about Dog Island on the Wii. And part of me was like, oh, maybe I should play Dog Island instead. I'm like, why do you want to play Dog Island, Ben? It's dogs on an island walking around, right? But like, there's nothing about Dog Island that means Lillian Dream World should get sacrificed for it, right? Sometimes I think about that with like, I will get so caught up on playing one game, and if there's a game that falls within that category, I will not play that other game because I want to play that other game first. And Dog Island as a video game, and I think there's reason to be that way, right? If I'm like, oh, I'm going to spend my time on this, I'll spend it on the thing that I really want to look at, right? But But Dog Island's not a game that I have a particular love for. I just know Dog Island is a game that looks kind of fun, and it was on the Wii, so it's like in an earlier Wii game, so it like maintains this space in my mind that's probably larger than other games, right? Lily and Dream World. So anyways, I put it on my wish list just to be like, maybe I'll check this out. We'll see. I don't know. I don't really regularly go to Steam for games, so it's a little hard. A lot of that digital stuff just kind of gets lost into the void for me, and I look at it once and go like, huh, cool. And then like, if it comes out 2 years later, like I don't know it came out. So I guess it's on my wish list on Steam, but I don't really use my wish list on Steam for anything. So I appreciate the thought, Ben, of today, trying to help Ben of the future, even if it doesn't actually work out. So speaking of Steam wish list, no one is one of the games on my Steam list. There's 4 games on my Steam wish list. You want to see what those games are? I don't even remember the other 2, but while I do that, there are 4 games. One is the hit Battle Royale game. What is it called? Oh my God, I forgot. It's the My Hero Academia Battle Royale game. That is on my Steam wish list because at the time, it was not out. Does it want to... Okay, there we go. Hey, Lily in Dreamland. It remembered that it was there. I don't even know. How do I navigate Steam? Welcome to the podcast where we navigate Ben's Steam account. All right, so we got... All right, now we have 5 games now. My first game on my Steam wish list, Video Ball, just in case it goes on sale. Video Ball shouldn't, like, there's no reason. It's almost a meme that, like in my friend group that we talk about Video Ball all the time. We have it on PlayStation, but we never play Video Ball. But anytime we talk about playing multiplayer games on PlayStation, Video Ball is in the conversation. Not all the time, but a lot of the time. So, but now that we're off PlayStation, I need Video Ball somewhere else. But Video Ball is $10, and that's a lot of money for a joke. Grand Blue Fantasy Versus. So this is the original Grand Blue Fantasy Versus because the story mode in that version of the game looks more interesting to me. So I have it there. I don't know if I'll ever do that. I still struggle with, like, I don't know if I actually care about Grand Blue Fantasy enough. My Hero Academia. Oh no, My Hero Ultra Rumble. That's the other one. That one's out. It's a play now button right now. So I can play that at this moment during the podcast if I really wanted to. It wouldn't make for a good podcast. Looking at my Steam wish list makes a great podcast. Playing My Hero Ultra Rumble in the middle of the podcast, I don't know, could be the best podcast ever. All right, I'm moving on. The last game on this list is Strinova. This is the segue, is that we're trying to get to Strinova. If you don't know what Strinova is, it is basically I guess you could say, a mix between a hero shooter and Counter-Strike, right? So, like, if you don't know about shooters, what does that mean, right? And I think, basically, as somebody who has not really played Counter-Strike that much, Counter-Strike is this kind of like small, dense map kind of shooter where there's a lot of very clearly defined corridors, and kind of the key gimmick with it is that there is kind of a attack and defense side. So one side is, I think, the terrorists typically in Counter-Strike, and they're trying to plant a bomb at one of 2 locations. Then you have the defense side where they're trying to either destroy the other team or plant or defuse the bomb if the bomb gets planted, basically, right? So it's kind of like that, and it's a very, I think, kind of high intensity game that looks for a lot of accuracy from the player, and I think it has this kind of community around it that's, like, I would say in that kind of, like, if you can think of like League of Legends and things like that, that kind of community, it feels like, where it's like the cap of high level play is so high that, if you get to at least a certain point in the rankings, you're probably just going to get shoved out really quickly, right? That's like the impression I have of Counter-Strike. I've never played Counter-Strike any meaningful amount, at least. And casually, I don't know what Counter-Strike looks like, but that's kind of the thing. It's like very tight quarter maps. And this is a game that is built on that kind of map design, but it has more hero shooter elements. So probably closer to like Overwatch, if you're familiar with that, where you have like a character that has particular special abilities and things like that. So I played like, so in shooters, if you don't know this about me, in shooters, I typically will play like a sniper, and I typically like a bolt action sniper in competitive games. I don't like bolt snipers in non-competitive games, but in competitive games I do, because they are very satisfying to hit people with, and when you hit them hard, and you can basically take them down in one shot depending on the game a lot of times. Depends on the game. Apex Legends kind of a separate thing, so that's something I really like. But it's kind of this weird dynamic here where, because the areas are all these kind of like tight, condensed corridors, being a sniper means it's not so much about finding the most open area that you can snipe at, it's kind of finding the longest corridor you can kind of like look down and have like enough space to see somebody. And almost all the time it feels like you're kind of like peeking between a bunch of different objects. So it's about kind of catching people as they kind of peek their heads out, rather than like, seeing somebody run across the map and trying to snipe them kind of thing. So it's a different kind of sniping, it feels like, with a game like this. But kind of the key gimmick here, in addition to just being kind of like an Overwatch kind of Counter-Strike mix, which is another game that does that called Valorant. But the key gimmick here is that the characters can turn into paper, almost like a Paper Mario sense. So when you press the control button instead of crouch, your character will turn to the side and become flat. And you can reload your gun in this period. You can switch weapons in this period, and it makes it a lot harder to shoot the other player. And it definitely, you can hit them, but it definitely makes it harder to hit them with like spread shots with like a shotgun or something like that, right? And so there's a lot to be, even though it's a little awkward to get used to, there's a lot of value in kind of like switching to the side and things like that. Then you can also kind of glide around the map. I think that's a little less useful, but again, it kind of makes it a little harder to hit you because you are flatter. And you can also walk on walls. My biggest problem with walking on walls in that game, though, is that you can't walk on every wall, which is a lot of good balance reasons for you to do that. But it just is unclear what walls you can walk on and which ones you can't. There is visual language to try to tell you what you can walk and walk off on, or what you can walk on and what you can't walk on. But I think in the middle of combat and stuff, it's a little hard to utilize the wall walking mechanic specifically, because it just isn't very clear if you can get on walls. Like, it just doesn't quickly read to me. I have to kind of like sit there and think about the wall, which, if I'm in the middle of shooting somebody and I'm trying to find a way to get out, thinking about the wall is something that can't happen, right? I need the wall to just be clearly defined as something I can kind of walk on. So I kind of wish there's a little bit more information kind of given to the player, whether it be the color of the wall or something like that. But anyways, so it's kind of this interesting little mishmash of a bunch of different games with like its own little gimmick in there. And it has something similar to like a lot of the Counter-Strike style games where you will like have a buy phase. So at the beginning of a round, you can buy things. And I don't 100% know how the resources for that kind of come together, if it's dependent on like how your team performs, or if do you get more money if you're losing. I don't really know how that stuff works. But in the typical Counter-Strike setup, I think you're like buying guns, and I don't know if you're buying like attachments or something like that to improve guns, but you're buying stuff, grenades, I assume, things like that. I don't really play Counter-Strike that much. In this game, you're buying enhancements for your character, and those enhancements also have kind of these different symbols associated with them. So they're like things like, hey, what does your run speed look like? What is the speed when you're in your paper form? What is the if you're using a sniper rifle, what is the charge time? Because there's like a charge on your sniper where like you have to look down sights before you can do your maximum damage a certain amount of time, things like that. And so it's like, reducing the charge time, or maybe changing, increasing your reload speed or decreasing your reload speed, things like that. So there's a lot of these different things that are improving your character, but there's little symbols by those improvements that once they add up, there's little like combinations on the bottom of the screen, and those certain symbols combined as you upgrade these parts will give you certain benefits. So like one of the snipers I play, she's like a girl who has she's like an idle sniper. So she has a little music note that she shoots out. And depending on the upgrades you give your character, what that music note does changes. So you can have one that basically buffs your party. So you shoot it out there. Its primary function is to tag enemies so you can see where they are. And so if they're in smoke screen and stuff, I can still see them and still snipe them, right? But if it's nearby your party, then it will basically cause them to get higher speed. I think increased defense or something like that as well. There's like a few number of buffs. And the other option is if you shoot it towards enemies, then it will, basically debuff them. So it reduces their firing rate and things like that. But the players can kind of actively move out of it, where your teammates will kind of actively stay in the one that you give them with when you give your team a buff. And because you're kind of congregating around these particular bomb points and things like that, it is, even though you might be like, why would you want to have the one that like targets enemies, in your base, as a buff for your party, it's something you can kind of more reliably rely on to continue to give you the benefits, where the other one will kind of like, once people walk out of range, then they're kind of gone unless they, walk back in for some reason. So, but then, yeah, so it's like, those aren't two things you can have on at the same time. You have to kind of like upgrade to one or the other. And then you can, if you get enough parts or upgrades on, and usually by the end of the match, you have pretty much all your upgrades. You can kind of switch between them as you want to and things like that. And there's like a baseline upgrade that's kind of your character's first upgrade, and that one is usually pretty easy enough to get on your own. But it kind of just makes you think a little bit about like, what are you upgrading? Because sometimes, you might want to start with just straight up upgrading your damage output initially, but you might want to instead upgrade to one that like increase your movement speed, because that better fits your kind of upgrade path for your character buffs and things like that. So it's like little decisions you make in regards to that, but it's kind of neat. So ultimately, this is just the beta that I was playing, and I think by the time you're hearing this, the beta is shut down again. I don't know when they're planning to relaunch the game, but I think I might spend more time with it. It's hard for me to say, because I don't know if I've been clear about this with shooters. I think I've talked about my feeling of like, I'm kind of ready for something new with shooters. If you don't know, like historically, I was really into shooters growing up, Quake, Tribes, Battlefield, all that stuff. This is like, kind of the late 90s, early 2000s. And then probably towards the end of the 2000s, I kind of fell off shooters for a bit. And then Splatoon and PUBG, the PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds, really kind of reignited my interest in shooters for a while, because I think both of those games just felt really different than usual. And I think as those kind of genres have kind of gone on, the Battle Royale genre, and if you want to call Splatoon a genre, like there's a very distinct look and feel to Splatoon. So, and you can tell what it is like when you look at foam stars and things like that, like, oh yeah, this feels like a Splatoon kind of game. I don't know if there's a name for it other than just like territory control. But like, I haven't really found another shooter since that has jumped out at me as like, yeah. And Counter-Strike's just something I never really played. I kind of skipped over Overwatch as well. So I feel like Strinova is just kind of filling in this hole that like is a set of shooters that I'd never really engaged with. But at the same time, there's kind of a reason I didn't engage with them, in that I don't think they stand out. Like Counter-Strike and Overwatch and all that stuff, they don't feel as meaningful to me as jumps in video game design. It feels more of like an extension of kind of the Call of Duty format. Just the way that we kind of situate some of the objectives and stuff is different. Saying that from a Call of Duty player perspective, I'm not saying that Counter-Strike, was influenced by Call of Duty initially, because Call of Duty came out later. But yeah, so I think that's just like, it was just something that already overlapped a lot with the games I've already played. And I would have rather seen them in kind of different genres. Like, and I played Apex Legends, which kind of takes the, hero shooter element of a game like Overwatch and puts it in a battle royale, kind of a big, everybody dropping in a giant field kind of thing. So I think I'm just kind of looking for something new. And Strinova, I don't think is anything specifically new. The paper gimmick is kind of cool. But it did, for me personally, just kind of fill in some holes that I had previously not really engaged with. And I'm kind of hoping that if I do spend more time with it, I'll learn a bit more about that. But because of that, I think it will be hard for the game to continue to keep my attention, especially if we go months and months without it actually officially releasing. So anyways, that is Strinova beta test. We'll talk about it again in the future. I think maybe, I don't know. We'll see. I think, like I said, I might fall off of it at some point. So do we want to talk about Kofi? We can talk about Kofi, or maybe we should talk about being a naughty little judgy boy. Let's talk about Kofi. Hey, what's that Higurashi thing? Have you eaten yet? Have you donated yet? Demo Dory, you did donate this last month. Thank you so much, Demo Dory, for taking care of my life, soul, and honor. With your, I think, $5 donation. That's what it is. I don't remember exactly what it is. But thank you, Demo Dory. I appreciate it. We are one step closer to the ultimate goal of, I don't know, making me taking a day off work to make a video, or work on a video rather. So I closed the Kofi, I think, already. So I don't know what we're at, but I think we're like at 90%. Almost there. Almost there. Anyways, just to kind of give you updates on what's going on, PSO video is done. So if you have donated on Kofi before, or if you're Demodori. Demodori, plus if you have donated on Ko-fi before, if you want to see what that video is, let me know. It is posted up there. It is done. The big thing is I just haven't finished the thumbnail and the name. And I'm also, so for Hot Pot Gaming, I am talking to a couple of guys who run PSO channels right now on YouTube. And I am kind of want to talk to them about PSO a little bit. And I don't really know if I should kind of hold on to this video until that podcast happens and I can kind of like cross-reference them. I don't know if that makes sense or not yet. So at this moment, I'm not rushing to put that PSO video out. But I'm not with a thumbnail or anything like that. I was trying to figure out like how to position the video because it kind of haphazardly came together. So just as a heads up, the PSO video probably not as sound as a lot of other videos that I have. But the people who watched it seem to enjoy it so far and find it entertaining. The gimmick of it, which goes back to like the shortcut window article I did forever ago, kind of was the basis of that video. But then when you sit down and see what the video is, the goal of the video was actually kind of different than what that article was. So I understand why I came to that position, but it was like basically I got to a point where it was like, well, I could fix this and spend more time on this video, or I kind of got what I needed out of this situation. And I don't care that much about what's being communicated here. Like, it's fun. It's a good time. Don't get me wrong. But like, it's not, I don't feel the need to like really hone in the language of that video in a way that like, I feel like other videos I feel is a lot more essential because I'm handling a lot more delicate kind of material. So, but yeah, I think that's kind of the plan with that. But if you want to go, if you have donated before and you can't access it, let me know. I'd be happy to send it to you so you can take a look. Otherwise, if you donate, you can check it out on Ko-fi.com. So anyways, upcoming video here this week is Alex Rider's Stormbreaker. So if you haven't heard of Alex Rider, I've only talked about it like 8 times, and I'm going to go ahead and click on some things here real quick while I check the YouTube because I don't remember what went up earlier. But Alex Rider's Stormbreaker is like a DS game, very kind of like silly, neat, fun, I don't know, kusoge, is that the right word for it, maybe? So, it's a cool game, and I really enjoyed it. So there's a little short video that goes up before that. That is, I believe, completely original content. I don't think we have talked about Alex Rider's Stormbreaker on this podcast before. And the week after that, I think that is the fixing my old NES video. Trying to being the key word there. So that's coming up there. So, just as a heads up, I talked about this last time. The OCP Plus stuff is going to be slowing down. It's just where it is at. Like I said, I kind of built a bunch of stuff ahead of time because I was just kind of working on just OCP Plus and not much else. But now that I'm kind of redistributing my resources across OCP, the main channel, PCFX Fan Club, and OCP Plus, things are just going to be slower. And so, especially when it comes to the Hot Pot Gaming podcast being kind of the focus right now on OCP Plus at the moment. So that is kind of the deal with that. But if you want to support me, feel free to do it on Ko-fi and get yourself a PSO video, because that might be, it might be months until that comes out, depending on the decisions I make. It might be a very long time till that PSO video actually comes out. So I do need to start working on some scripts for some other stuff. That is definitely on the docket of something I would like to try to start doing. One of those things I think is really kind of putting some pen to paper with Final Fantasy XI video script. I've done a lot of thinking about what that video should be again. And while I can't finish it today, I think I could at least start putting together the pieces of what I want to say and how I want to say it and what I need to do to find my way to finish that. So, and there's a few other things I'm looking at as well. So, Ben, you have a brain, and in your brain, you think of things. One of the things that I think a lot about, I am someone who's very, very self-critical, right? And sometimes that gets spread out to other people in a way that I don't particularly like that much. But, I've had some people say like, oh, Ben, you're really considerate or stuff like that. And it's like, yes, I am. I do try my hardest to be considerate of other people. But I think maybe the thing that that I really hope when you are watching my stuff is realizing that, a lot of the things that I feel like I've come to where people are like, I'm really happy you talked about something this way, or the type of language you used, I think came with a lot of pain and suffering to get there, right? And a lot of that is because there are things in my life that I personally feel like I have not done a great job of before, right? There's a lot of things, and like and a lot of times we don't know why we feel the way about certain things we feel, right? I always talk about with like Final Fantasy 14, where like I will sit there and be nitpicky about everything in Final Fantasy 14, and for the life of me cannot put a finger down on why I feel the way about Final Fantasy 14 I do. And so like sometimes I don't know what I actually dislike about something, right? And so it's really hard to navigate that stuff. And so human brains are great, and we don't understand ourselves a lot of times. So anyways, the point being, though, is I talked a little bit about this before, where like I am very judgmental when it comes to anime, right? So when I see anime, I often will read the description for an anime and kind of roll my eyes at it and be like, oh, Sosuke is a high school boy and he has arm guns and he's just normal high school student with arm guns. Ah! and it's like, okay. And, you know, it's fine. Like, I think really what I'm trying to say in that situation is that, like, there's, like, these gimmicks and stuff to shows, and I kind of just, like, am like, okay, whatever. And, like, a lot of times there'll be games or things where it's like, hey, Fire Force, I think is what it's called, like, the firefighting anime. If it was a video game, I would be all on board. I'd be really excited to play the weird firefighting game. Where you punch fires or something like that. I think that's my impression of what's going on with that anime. But the anime itself, I'm just like, I don't really want anything to do with this because I know the kind of dialogue that's going to be in it. I know the type of storytelling is going to be in it and like all that stuff. And I dismiss these things well before I've even really given them a chance. It's like, there's something I'm interested in here with this, but because it's anime, I'm out, kind of thing. And a lot of people be like, well, maybe it's okay for you not to like anime, which is perfectly valid. You know, it's not that I don't know, let's not get into that. But like, I think it is perfectly valid to be like, well, I just don't like anime or whatever. But I think if you know me well enough, I'm very rarely am satisfied with, I just don't like something. I usually want to know why I don't like something. And I think one of the things that I can feel comfort in is if I can tell you why I don't like something, right? Going back to the Zensis thing, I can't tell you why Zensis is bad, but I can tell you why. What game was it? Monster High Ghoul Spirit was disappointing, if not bad. I can tell you why that is, right? And so it makes it a little easier for me to feel confident what I'm saying and things like that. So anytime I dislike something and it's just like, I can't think of why I dislike something or put logic behind it, it's a little challenging for me. So I think what happens is I have this very like judgmental mindset when it comes to certain things like anime. And I think that expands beyond anime as well. I think if you ever heard me complain about, I try not to do this as much because I think it's kind of rude for me to do it. And I think I'm a little being stupid in doing this, where like sometimes I will see somebody else's content and I'll see how they present the content. And I get really upset. I'm just like, I don't really want to watch this, right? There's like a video a while ago that was like, where did all the games for, or why, I forgot, it was like, why are all the games for girl bad or something like that? Or why are they, where did all the good ones go? Or something like that, right? And I just get like, I'm like, I don't know. I feel like if I don't remember this is years ago, but like, I feel like if you present it as why are all the games for girls bad, you've already kind of told me what your stance is on games for girls, and it's like, okay. It's like, well, as somebody who appreciates games for girls, I don't agree with that analysis in the first place. And so there's a lot of things like that. But sometimes it gets a little bit more where I start like attaching assumptions onto something that may not necessarily be true, right? There's like videos that are like, hey, I check out these like 12 DS shovelware games that are actually great. And it's like, you know, a fairly regular video game that's a thumbnail is like not a shovelware game at all. And like, I feel like shovelware is a term that is used for like a bad business practice. And I think we just kind of made the word shovelware a little too broad in a lot of ways. So there's like stuff like that. But anyways, the point being is that recently there's a very good video somebody sent me that I think if you are into Japanese video games, you should definitely check out. Their username is Geki Gemu. And it's an Italian video. And but it does have machine translation on there, and it mostly works. The only place that it really breaks down is when it comes to game names and stuff. But if you are enough into kind of these niche Japanese games, then you, I think you will be able to get around it without too much trouble. And I think based on the machine translation, I think the translation for it is like the end ? Of Japanese video games. I don't necessarily know if that intent is coming across. I know like some things in the video is talking about him kind of like maybe stepping away from the channel, so I don't know for sure if that is meant to be like the end of Japanese games as a whole or the end of this segment or whatever, right? But it was kind of nice. He reached out to me about stuff. He was like, hey, can you give me your thoughts on the Japanese game industry? And it's specifically presenting it to me as like, where did the interesting and weird Japanese games go? And I think in my brain, I immediately attached that with like, oh, video games aren't as good as they used to be. And that is like, to me, feels like a very old man thought in a lot of ways. I just like, I feel like any creative medium kind of goes through that phase of like people in their 30s and 40s kind of disconnecting from, the latest stuff and things like that because they're not necessarily the primary audience as much. And you have, this past record of values that kind of lead you to, one place or another. And I think I kind of attached that to that. Not that I was like actually really like, I wasn't like upset at it, but like I was kind of just like flustered at the question. And I think also I'm not really an expert on Japanese video games, but he was asking me like I was an expert and I was like, I don't know. But I am maybe a little harsh on myself in that regard. I one thing I told him afterwards, after I sent him a message confessing my feelings about this whole thing, was like, I feel a lot more comfortable being like an observer versus like a researcher, probably, honestly. So anyways, the point being is I think got a little flustered by this because I was like, it's just this feeling that like, oh, inherently there's something worse about video games today. Again, he wasn't necessarily saying this, but I had attached this meaning to that, right? And I kind of was like, my response to him, I think, was me not so much saying where did the weird Japanese games goes, but like putting my perspective on things of like, okay, well, like what did video games used to be and how have video games evolved and what were the things that made games at the time more unique and what has changed since then and how do we look at games and how does that change, right? How do we see games? How do we find games, right? There's so many of these questions that I think make it really hard to say that like there's, in this case, the video is kind of about like why there are less weird and interesting Japanese games that come out. And I won't go through the whole process of what my answer was, but I did do that. And then so the video is like an hour and a half long. If you know with me, I have a hard time watching long videos, but I did finally sit down and make the time to sit down and watch it. And it was a great video. And like, I think he came to all the conclusions that I would hope he would come to when it comes to, things like, hey, just because, it's harder to find these games doesn't necessarily mean that they don't exist, right? Especially when you look at independent scenes and things like that. And the way that games get made and the size of these companies is all very different, right? And I think he was incredibly considerate about that whole perspective. And also, he did the research, I think, to say, okay, here's a particular type of video game that I was looking for from this era, and it was informed by this kind of cultural revolution in Japanese culture, right? And this is like, and I think that's a smart way to look at it. It's look at it, like go beyond games, look at movie culture, look at music culture, look at all that stuff, look at fashion culture. That is the smart way to do it if you're going to do it. And it's something I would never do because I don't really know anything about that stuff. And I would never have the confidence, I think, to say that. But, he does a good job, I think, of stating, here are these things, here are the things that influenced it, here are these, quotes and things like that from here and there. And then the cases where he's not 100% sure, I felt like he was a pretty good job of saying, hey, I'm not sure about this, but, this seems to be kind of the way this lines up. Anyways. So yeah, and it just made me think about me just being like a judgy little boy. And I was just like, I had gotten all like flustered up, not flustered. Again, I wasn't angry or anything like that, but I think like it really kind of skewed my view of like what this video was trying to do. Initially when he sent it to me, and like one flattered he even asked me to do it, but like at the same time my little baby boy brain was still just like, I don't know, I think video games are fine today. So anyways, I don't know if you listen to the podcast. If you listen to the podcast, don't think too much of it. Like I said, this is a me problem. And there's a lot of little things like that in my life that I feel like I should be able to eject, where it's like me being overly judgmental of something I don't understand, a person I don't know. I think a lot of it comes down to me not knowing enough about a topic of what somebody's trying to address, or me not knowing enough about that person a lot of times. And in some ways, this can apply, and I think back to the anime thing where like, I was interested in Shining Hearts recently because I'm playing Shining Blade and finding out Shining Hearts is actually fairly connected to Shining Blade. And the Shining Hearts anime got localized, but not the game. So I was like, maybe I should just watch the anime because I don't think I have a lot of interest in playing the Shining Hearts game, even if it did get fan translated. And like the story is like this guy, it's kind of this cute idea where it's like a little bread group or whatever, like a bread maker group. And there's a guy named Rick, everybody's favorite character. I make fun of Rick all the time in the fighting game with my friend who plays it. But Rick, and he has 3 anime girls with him, and the anime girls seem like the most tropey anime girls of all time. And I judge the hell out of them, and I'm like it's like they just feel they're like the so tropey, and like I kind of just throw their characters out the window before we even start. And you're like, and I like, yes, I get it, like that's kind of what they're intended to be, and it makes sense that they might feel shallow up front. But I think the big thing for me is I don't really give them the time and consideration that they deserve. And I think some of that like showed up when I was playing Snowbreak Containment Zone too, where like I look at this cast of all these girls like specifically aimed at like particular tropes to like appeal to men, and I'm just like I immediately am dismissive of all of them. However, handsome anime boys in games and anime, all for them. Like, yeah, for sure, I'll give them every moment to figure out like how they can show me that their character is interesting, you know, even though it's just yet another hot-headed delinquent guy. Let's see what this hot-headed delinquent guy does. So it's just weird inconsistencies with like that. And like, I think to some extent, some of that gendered stuff in particular might go back to like, if you want to really get into it, like to, you know, family members of mine, like getting sexually harassed when growing up. And so like, I have a different perspective of like how women are portrayed versus how men are portrayed and what that does, and all that stuff. That is not something I'm sitting here saying that like I have the answers to what is right and wrong in that situation. That is me saying I'm aware that I grew up in that situation, and I highly suspect it is a part of why I have a hard time with certain things regarding like taking, you know, kind of these like the dolled up anime girls a little bit more seriously in the way that I do with dolled up anime boys, essentially, right? So things like that. I think what I'm really saying at the end of the day is that I don't want to. I'm not saying I need to like it. I'm not saying that I need to like consume it, right? You know, I think there's only so much time in my life and stuff, right? And so much time in my interests and stuff like that. And that's not to say that they, you know, that like, oh, these characters aren't tropey, pandery things. But you know, the way they are appreciated by other people is like different, right? And I think being respectful of that and not immediately being dismissive of them, I think is something I would like to be better about as a person, and hopefully improve over time. But we'll see. How I do that's a whole other thing. But it does feel like a lot of the things that I am kind of bothered by about myself in terms of how I interact with games or how I interact with other like creators with stuff or how I interact with anime comes from this like knee-jerk reaction to make assumptions based off, you know, some set of facts that make me feel a certain way, even if that's not real, right? I think that is kind of how I feel about that a little bit. So I also have on this list, I feel like I said what I wanted to say there, but I also have on this list Trails of the Sky, Trails of Cold Steel and stuff like that. I don't know if this 100% relates. Someone did recently link me in another Discord, like a thing being like, oh, the new Trails game is like the best way to get into the series today, and they linked the review and stuff. And it wasn't like specifically aimed at me. They're just saying like, I know some people in here are interested in maybe trying this at some point. And I have expressed interest in at some point maybe look at the Trails series. But man, one of the things that I run into with the Trails series specifically is that I feel like a lot of the praise for that series is very normal. And I think what I mean by that is the praise comes off as somebody saying, this is a good video game. And it's like, okay, like, cool. What is interesting about this game though, which obviously I am of a particular mindset when looking at video games, right? And other people aren't. Some people just want to find a good RPG, but it's like kind of the trouble that you have, or I have, with like the Xeno series, where, and when I was doing the Sonebringer video, I was like trying to describe like what the Xeno series is. When you put it on paper, it just sounds like every other JRPG series. It's like, yeah, okay, yeah, this is all lines up, right? Every other series I've played that, at least is a fairly respectable series or respectable game, kind of does all this stuff too. So the question I think comes down to like, okay, if this thing is really good, and we're going to sit here and be like, the characters are super in depth, or the world's super in depth and all that stuff, like, what are we doing with this that makes that distinct, right? And it doesn't need to be distinct. To be clear, it doesn't need to be. But for my personal interest, I think I'm looking for the question of like, what makes that stand out? And I think the two answers I got that probably was the most convincing to me was, I believe, one was about the pacing, where it was like, it takes more time to slow down. And so it gives you more time to kind of enjoy that world in a more laid back way, even though it's like a JRPG, right? And that's true for a lot of other JRPGs, but I could see a video game handle that in a way that is better than some of the other games I've played, like Shining Resonance, right? Shining Resonance has a lot of like dating scenes where you go around town, you hang out, you buy bread with your girlfriend, boyfriend, whoever you want. You and Agnum, the real pair of that video game. You two go off and, you open a jar of peanut butter. No, the guy opens the jar of something for you, and then he's... Anyway, sorry, we're getting into the dating scenes of Shining Resonance. The point being is that, it does things in there that I think they try to give that more laid back nature of like, you're just hanging out with somebody. But I could see that being improved, because a lot of times with like Shining Resonance, at least, it's very structured, it's very broken up, and it's a kind of separate part of the main game. So it sounds like maybe this game series does a better job, or maybe not better job, creates a more holistic version of that aspect of an RPG, maybe. And the other one was that the world building is not so much lore dumping. It's more about showing you the world. I think those are the two things that I was like, okay, I'll take those. Those are two things that I think I have not known about this series before, that I think is really helpful in helping me build a better understanding of what makes this work. And I think this is kind of where, review writing versus, analytical writing is a little bit more different. I don't know if analytical writing is the right term, right? But in those situations, I think what you're trying to convey is a little bit different. And with review writing, it is more about, you're going to have a great experience. This is a great story, well-built story. This is a JRPG story, not afraid to talk about racism. And it's like, all right, it depends on what you mean by that. It's like, because, hey, guess what? A lot of JRPGs talk about racism, but we like to try to cover it up in all the ways we can, right? Guess what? There's a hit video game called Valkyria Chronicles with dark sins. And they're basically Jewish people, right? And, there's a whole thing with that. But, it's a game based off World War II, right? So, God, the whole giant bomb thing where they the guy reviewing the game mistaked Darksons as black people. I forgot about that until now. It was it's perfectly understandable. If you're just when you're jumping into Valkyria Chronicles 4, and you don't know what a Darkson is, right? And with that name, you might make some assumptions, but yeah, that was Hey, guess what? Video game reviewers, not meant to be experts. So, and that includes me. Anyways, point being, trying to find the right language of that stuff is a little tough. So trying to find the right language of what makes a game stand out in general is a little tough, I think. I feel like sometimes I wonder if it'd be kind of fun to like try to engage with people who are actively making content a little bit more and be like, hey, what you trying to do over here, buddy? What's going on? And like seeing if there's a way to help them find words that better define the things that make certain games stand out. Because it is really hard to sit there and just get like a bullet point list of like story great, characters great, combat good, 9 out of 10. Like, and like, what does that tell me about your video game? I guess it means it's good. Like, I'm not looking for the same thing as other people, but I think it'd be kind of fun to have those conversations with people, whether or not they would want it is another thing. So, but, or make a little picture book. It could make, there's the little, what was it? 4Gamer has a thing of like English learning pictures right now. So there's one that's like casting. And so it's like a little like anime character casting a spell, and it's like, here's the English word for casting, and you can read it better in games now. Like, it's like a lot of like fundamental things, like what does poison mean and stuff like that, right? Because people playing games in English kind of deal. It's a fun little series. It'd be kind of fun to do like a little picture book of like how to try to better extract what makes a game unique, or maybe not unique, but what makes a game distinct. I like the word distinct a lot better. Well, that's a good word or not is another thing, but anyways, what are we talking about? I've lost track of what we're doing. Do you know there's a video game? I don't even know how long this spot. I had to go and like I did grocery delivery, and I had to go pick those up in the middle of a podcast at some point. Can you find the spot where I did that? Good luck. Tell me, send me the timestamp, and I don't know. What do you want to win? If you send me the correct timestamp, I will draw you an MS Paint picture of your favorite character. It won't be good, but it will be there. Anyways. Spider-Man 2 for the Nintendo DS, guys. Look, I've had this game since Christmas of 2004. My stepmom gave it to me for a Nintendo DS game. I'm sure she did all the full research she did on what was a good video game, and definitely didn't just buy it because Spider-Man was on the cover, and Spider-Man was hot with the kids in 2004. But yeah, I mean, I had Super Mario 64 on the DS, Metroid Prime First Hunt, and stuff like that. So Spider-Man 2 was kind of the other game in the collection, right? It is the last resort. I put it in, I checked it out, touched it briefly, never really played it. I was desperate for DS games, but apparently not enough for Spider-Man 2. And, I think to some extent, part of me was like at the point where movie licenses had a stigma to me. And so the idea of playing a movie license game was not something that was like super up my alley. And if I could play anything else, I would. But in finally sitting down to play this game, I did keep this on my to-do list for 20 years. I played my original copy. This is not a reacquisition. This is the same game. I found a game that is flawed in many ways, or at least one core issue that kind of makes a really big impact on the game. But it's got some really cool things too, in particular when it comes to like Spider-Man's moveset. So, as a launch DS game, this game's pretty limited, like even compared to the GBA game. The GBA game had like a full 3D open world. This game is pretty straightforward. It's like this 2.5D approach. It kind of like bends around and but you're always on a side-scrolling platform basically. And it isn't like a full 2.5D kind of game, right? It's not like a Mario Brothers game where you're going to go from start to finish in a level, and that's just kind of it. Instead, it's almost like a scavenger hunt game. So there's like these layered environments with like different like buildings you can kind of get on, ledges kind of hanging out of them, awnings, I guess you could call them maybe, and then different like, rooftops and things like that you can get on and things like that. And so a lot of the game is about looking for enemies and objectives throughout these environments and then clearing all of them out so you can basically go ahead and leave the level. It does feel like maybe they're a little tight on budget here and time for the launch of this game, because while these levels are utilized in different ways, they kind of rehash a lot of them, where you're going to use the same levels over and over and over again, but then basically look for different things in them each time, whether they be enemies or computers you need to disarm, or bombs you need to disarm, rather, things like that. But because there's no like real main path in these levels, you're kind of free to do what you want. They're kind of like these little 2D open worlds a little bit. And it's pretty cool because Spider-Man has, you know, as a character, I've never played a Spider-Man game before this, or any other one after this as well so far, is that Spider-Man has like a really neat moveset, right? He has his little like web thing that he shoots out, and that allows him to kind of like swing across the sky really fast. And he also has it where he can directly web at walls and things like that. And what's really cool about webbing at walls is he can also break that webbing. So when he's like halfway through being like dragged towards a wall really fast, you can let go and just kind of fling Spider-Man off. And so it's got this really cool movement that helps you move around these levels in really fast and fun ways. And you can gain a lot of momentum in general. So it feels really good to move in this game, and I really appreciate that. And because the levels are so open, there's a lot of space for you to do these things. The DS screen, you know, being this little kind of small 4x3 thing, does kind of limit your view, so it can be hard to tell what's happening off screen and if you're safely moving forward and things like that. But the overall, I think it works really well. The problem is that the scavenger hunt aspect of this game really kills this part of the game's, you know, benefit, I guess you could say, this good aspect of the game. Because when you're doing these scavenger hunt things, a lot of these things you're looking for are required, and every single one of the things on the map are required. So you need to kind of like scour every little nook and cranny on the map looking for these enemies to kill, or to disarm these bombs and things like that. And that is the thing that you absolutely have to do. But because there's no map and because there's no indicators, it means you are going to stop and walk across the ground all the way across, and then you're going to go across every rooftop and go back and then swing around through the air time and time again. And because of how the levels hide away these objectives, sometimes they actually can be really hard to find. And some of these things are actually pretty cool, where it's like, okay, here's a death pit, but Spider-Man can walk on walls or crawl on walls, right? And so you can crawl down into the death pit and find your objectives there. And it's not one of those things where it's like, oh, this is the one death pit that this makes sense. It is something that is pretty clearly messaged to you that if you fall down there, it's like, okay, this can happen to me. And then also it's the only part of the death pit or game where the death pits happen. So, you know, it's always like when you go down there, you can always crawl down there and see like the environment down there and stuff like that. So it's not like super unclear. I know like the kind of death pit secret thing has kind of a bad rap to some extent, right? But I think in this particular situation, it works pretty well. So there's like some cool things like that, but the pacing of the game is just like absolutely killed by this, because you need to stop and look at every little part of the environment, look at every corner, look at every ledge, and make sure you are not missing the thing you're looking for. Because if you get to the end of the level and you did not get everything, you need to turn back, and you may have missed something at the very beginning of the area of where you started and things like that. So it just really clashes with the game's play style, because you have this really fun, high-speed movement that Spider-Man has, but it feels like every part of the game's objectives are encouraging you to slow down and take it, you know, step by step. And a part of this is, or I guess maybe a part of what is also kind of bad about this, is because there's no like real indicator, you have to kind of memorize the level if you want to get like a good rank. And why ranks matter in this game is that there's this combat system, actually a really ambitious combat system in this game, where it has like juggles and things like that, slow down, where you can slow down time and like punch enemies out of the air. You have special abilities and you can throw enemies off ledges and things like that. There's a lot of really cool stuff going on here. There's different types of punches and kicks, and you can like you know, like do launchers and things like that. A lot of really cool stuff here. But it's kind of overkill for the type of game this is. I think just a normal punch would have been probably fine in most cases, and like maybe a web fling. But there's a bunch of special moves you have, and all of them are locked behind getting a better rank, it seems like. I think I read on GameFAQs that's what it is. And the reason I say that is because I never ended up unlocking any of these skills, because it seems like it requires you to get a fairly high rank on a mission. And because the missions were just kind of like these weird scavenger hunty things where you had to memorize the location of everything on the map, it was one of those things that you didn't necessarily want to do again, even if the movement was cool. At least for me, I just like, you know, I just don't really find replaying these missions to be particularly fun a lot of times, despite the movement being pretty cool in the game. So I ended up never unlocking any of these special moves. I think it's like 12 of them, and you start with 3 and you never unlock them. But it's not something that you really need. But it is kind of a shame because the combat is something that seems pretty cool here, and I don't think it would have like fixed the game or anything, but it would have been nice to kind of play around with them a little bit more and things like that. But maybe my other one complaint as well is that like the levels are just a little long, and there's not really a checkpoint system, I think, if I remember correctly. So like some levels, if you die at the very end, you have to go and re-find all the things you scavenger hunted and make sure you don't miss them again. So there's a lot of things, and some of the mazes or levels are very maze-like, so it's a little easy to kind of miss this stuff. So either way, I'm really glad I sat down and finally played this game. Like I said, I think there's a lot of really cool things with movement in this game, and maybe that's just like a general Spider-Man thing, right? I don't really know how each Spider-Man game handles how Spider-Man moves, but this game just feels like it did try to do something with it. And the levels themselves actually feel pretty decent at accommodating that movement, but the problem is that the objectives in the game just really prevent you from doing all that much with it, I feel like. So anyways, that's it for this week. I thought about talking about Chaos Rings, but I don't know what the time is because I went and did the grocery stuff in between. But I believe it's a full podcast. We'll leave it at that. Also, I feel like Chaos Rings, I might still don't know if I want to try to save that for a video, but I do want to probably, if I don't make a decision by 2 weeks from now what I'm doing with it and start like putting my thoughts down on paper, I'll probably just talk about it on the podcast next week, or next two weeks from now. So anyways, that's that. Thanks for listening to me ramble today. I know I kind of got down in the weeds a bit today, but kind of a looser show, loosey-goosey, having a good time with myself here. Is my cat behind me? I don't know what was behind me. I felt a presence. Anyways, so we're going to wrap up there. So thank you for coming. Thanks for listening. OneKillWord.com is the website. Again, Alex Rider, Stormbreaker next week. If that Spider-Man 2 talk interested you, Alex Rider, Stormbreaker, right up your alley. And I think probably a better game in my opinion. But, comes together better, maybe I should say, but also flawed in a lot of ways. Also an early DS game, but very cool overall. So anyways, that's gonna be all. I hope you guys enjoy your next 2 weeks, and you guys have a great time with whatever you're doing. Oh, July 4th in America. I was trying to make fireworks noises, and then I started getting to like the noise, and then I got like in between a what is my fireworks celebration? Automaton. Somebody going down the street with an automaton going over and over and over and over again. That was what I was trying to convey, probably. I don't know. Retroactively assigning meaning. Goodbye.